This is not Nightmare on Elm Street. Don't worry, Freddy's not coming to your bed tonight. But here's the catch. You may experience a different kind of nightmare after watching this one, because this sure was a nightmare that took place on 5th Avenue, New York City. On March 9th, 1947, just after midnight, 61-year-old Langley Collyer, the famous pianist and trained engineer, would slip out of his mansion and go for an 8-mile walk south. This guy was extremely wealthy, but he sure looked like a bum. Langley was going on this 8-mile walk to get something for his older brother, Homer, who was sick in bed on the 2nd floor of the mansion. Langley would do these trips at night because he sure didn't want no one to see him. So as he walked, he would look around. Is anybody following me? To make sure he wasn't being followed. Then finally at 2 a.m., he reached his destination, a specific dumpster in Brooklyn, New York. He jumped in, got the things he was coming for, jumped back out, and went back home. A few weeks later, on March 21st, at a nearby police station, a sergeant would receive a call from a man saying his name is Charles Smith. He would tell the sergeant there is a dead body at the Collyer brothers' mansion. The sergeant didn't really believe it because there was always rumors that the Collyer brothers were going out in the middle of the night, carrying big bags over their shoulders, going to dumpsters and things like that. And they would send police officers to check it out, and everything would turn out fine. So he didn't really believe him. So he told him, "Hey, Charles Smith, how do you know there's a dead body there?" And Charles Smith just hung up the phone. The sergeant didn't really believe Charles Smith, but he had to do a wellness check anyway. So he would send a police officer out there to check it out. When the police officer arrived at the mansion, he would look at it. It looked completely disgusting. The windows were boarded up, they had metal on them, newspaper was coming out of the window. He didn't even actually believe anyone lived at that mansion. But keep in mind, the Collyer brothers were not normal. You see, Langley and Homer's dad was a doctor, and he would bring home body parts and put them in jars all over the mansion. He was a very weird guy. He would actually canoe to his office building every day, which actually meant he would go outside carrying a big canoe on his shoulder, going to the East River, putting it in the water, and canoeing to work every day. What a weirdo. As for the mother, she was their father's first cousin, and she actually kicked the father out when he tried to turn the mansion into a sanatorium for people recovering from tuberculosis. She told him, "Get out of here, man, you're always ruining my life with your crazy ideas." Despite these guys coming from a weird and odd family, they were geniuses. Homer, the older brother, got accepted to Columbia University at the age of 14 to study law. Langley, the younger brother, 5 years younger, also graduated from Columbia University with 2 degrees, chemistry and engineering. Besides that, he was a famous pianist that performed at Carnegie Hall. Despite these guys being so successful and wealthy, they never got married or anything. And in 1933, 14 years before Charles Smith would call the police station and report a dead body, Homer would have a stroke and would become completely blind, and Langley would quit everything and just stay home and take care of his brother. These guys never left the mansion afterwards, and they started becoming weirder and weirder and weirder. They stopped paying their bills and everything. They didn't pay their water bill, their electricity bill, their mortgage. They didn't pay anything. And when the electricity got turned off, Langley didn't pay it. He went out and he bought a Model T Ford and pulled the engine out of it and created his own generator and lit up that mansion. And when they foreclosed on his house, the police came knocking on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Langley would answer and tell them, "What you guys want?" The police would tell him, "It's time to hit the road, Jack." And then he said, "No, no, no," and pulled out a check and wrote the amount for the whole mansion and gave it to the police and started singing, "Hit the road, Jack, and don't you guys come back no more." No, I'm just kidding. He didn't sing. The song wasn't even out yet. But for real, he did write the police a check for the full amount and told them, "Please leave us alone." Now let's fast forward to March 21st, when the police officer went to check on the dead body story. He went to the front door of the mansion, knocked on it. Knock, knock, knock. No answer. So he pounded on it. Boom, boom, boom. Still no answer. But the police officer knew he couldn't just leave. He had to get in there because this is a dead body report. So he tried to break in the front door with his shoulder. Boom, boom, boom. And finally the door would open about 4 inches so he could look inside, and he saw a man-made wall, so he knew there was no way going in that way. But of a whiff of a smell would hit his face, whoo, whoo, that he knew a dead body was in there. So he backed up and called for backup. 7 police officers would arrive at the scene, all of them trying to figure out a way to enter this mansion. One of them said, "Let's try the second floor." They got a ladder, put it up on the building, and they climbed up, broke the window, and it worked. All 7 were in. As soon as they entered the mansion, they realized Charles Smith was telling the truth. There was a dead body in the mansion. It was Homer, the older brother. He was found on a chair slouched over like this, dead, and all orange peels surrounded him. The coroner would determine that Homer was likely dead for about 10 hours. As for Langley, he was nowhere to be found, so of course he would become the #1 suspect to his brother's death. A matter of fact, they thought he may be Charles Smith, the one that called in and was calling in to report his brother's death. So they issued a 9-state alarm, meaning all the states surrounding New York to be on the lookout for Langley for questioning for his brother's death. They also posted an officer outside the mansion, just standing there waiting. Maybe Langley would return and they could detain him. While police agencies were searching all over the East Coast, detectives were inside the mansion searching it, trying to determine what may have taken place or where Langley may have went to. And on April 8, 18 days later, they would find something in the mansion that would break this case wide open. Okay, let's go back to March 21st, when that lone officer was able to open the front door about 4 inches and look inside and see that man-made wall. You see, that was not a wall. That was basically just trash. The brothers were hoarders. Hoarders are people that never throw anything out. You see, the brothers were worried that people might come in the mansion and steal their treasures. They really had treasures like jewelry, money, and whatnot, but that wasn't the treasure they were worried about. Their real treasure was the things that they were getting from the dumpster in Brooklyn. So they made these weird tunnels inside the mansion and filled them up with booby traps that they only knew where the booby traps were. And that's how they traveled all over the mansion, through these tunnels. As the police officers were investigating one of these tunnels, they would find a clue that would break this case wide open. Do you guys remember that night on March 9th when Langley went to the dumpster in Brooklyn? Guess what he found in that dumpster? It was just oranges. It was a fruit store throwing away oranges, and he was collecting them to feed his brother, because he did this weird research and he found out that citrus helps with your vision. So, a matter of fact, he did not feed his brother anything for the past weeks except oranges, and Homer actually believed it and started eating just oranges. So that night when Langley returned home, He was going to feed his brother these oranges. So he was going through one of these tunnels, and he had created this booby trap. It was like metal boxes filled with newspapers, and if you hit the bottom of it, they all would collapse on you and pin you down. And that is exactly what happened to him. He hit it, and he was pinned down. He was only 10 feet away from Homer, so he cried to Homer, "Homer, Homer, Homer." But Homer couldn't help him, because Homer was so weak from just eating oranges, and he was also blind. So eventually, Langley would be crushed to death within a couple of hours. It would take Homer 2 weeks to starve to death. As Homer was starving to death, he would hear rats eating his brother's body. The big clue that I was telling you guys about that broke this case wide open was actually Langley's foot inside that tunnel. It was completely eaten up by rats, and when they looked a little deeper inside, they would find his whole skeleton. As for Charles Smith, that was just probably a person walking by the mansion, and he smelled death in the air and called the police department to report it in. 4 months after their bodies were found, that mansion was considered a fire hazard and completely demolished. Today, a park with a couple trees and one bench stands there, called the Collyer Brothers Park. Thank you guys so much for watching today's show. I'm Ahmed Bassioni. Please like, share, and subscribe. God bless you. I'm out of this joint.